Are you ready? Okay. So,
Right above your I'm good with spiders. You all right? Yeah. I usually take them from outside. Now it's down to this. It's fine.
I wasn't going to, I was going to try to take a scoop.
That was close to the coffee cup, though. Was there coffee back there that I missed? I think there was just water in the carafe.
Do you want some coffee?
It would be great. Not urgent, just the black. I did that once with a cricket. Scooped it up, opened the door, threw it outside, and then a lizard went out and ate it. Well, that's what I get.
do we have Deborah? Or is she able to do this? She's able to. Good evening. This is a special city council meeting for Tuesday, April 13th. The April 13th city council meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the governor's executive order N-2920. Pursuant to the governor's executive order dated March 17th, 2020, the city council is authorized to hold public meetings via teleconferencing and make meetings accessible electronically to all members of the public seeking to observe and to address the legislative body. All Brown Act provisions that require the physical presence of city council members or the public for city council meetings are waived. We don't need roll call because we're in attendance. Okay, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Council meeting. Study session review the administrative processes, cities, boards, commissions, committees, and city council and direction on potential modifications. City manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At our last meeting, we were able to get through 2 operational items with the council. Sections 3, in reflecting the scope and membership and meeting schedule for all the different boards, committees, and commissions.
What page is that on?
That would be from pages 1 to 2 of the 11 by 17 pullout.
Chris,
Section 4.
Is it possible to turn your volume up a smidge? Or, yeah, that too.
Is that better?
There you go. Thank you.
Perfect. So section 4 begins, the title is at the bottom of page 2 and goes into page 3, which includes appointments, term of office, and then the appointment of employees' relatives, which is the last significant item we covered. We've actually made draft changes to the board's handbook that would come at the next council meeting if we're able to complete this today, along with any changes that we find today. However, in going back and reviewing some of the changes, there was one additional request that staff had asked, and that was in relation to the Planning Commission, that the current meeting schedule is the first and third Thursdays at 7 p.m. in the council chambers. And a request from the Community Development Director, who is already coordinated with the Planning Commission members, is to change that to the first and third Tuesdays at the same time and location. Is there any opposition from the council to implement that requested change? Okay.
Chris, what meetings does that conflict with? Because I do believe there are, I think, Parks and Rec and Public Safety.
Public Safety would be one of those meetings. Parks and Rec, which meets on odd months on the third Tuesday, would also potentially conflict. And so I initially had some concerns because I want to be able to attend every commission. However, I'm going to have to, in some cases, send a designee, either the assistant city manager or the department head.
Thank you.
And so we will start on page 4 at the top. Now, while some of the items are highlighted in yellow, those were the ones that either the council or staff had requested some potential changes. We can go over any of the items that are not highlighted either. But the next one is in regards to resignation. So the requirement in the board's, commissions, and committees handbook is that a letter announcing a resignation to the commission is required from the commission to both the mayor and the city manager. And we would forward that to the council. The change that's requested is to change, to make everything align with the city clerk, because the city clerk is the one who manages the committees and the applications and the membership. If there's no opposition to that, we'll just make city manager references be city clerk.
Sounds good to me.
No issue.
In terms of attendance, with 3 consecutive meetings or a pattern of repeated absences, the commissioner may be removed, while illnesses and any prior excused absences are accepted from those unexcused absences. The question before the council is, does the city council desire to more explicitly define what would lead to a commissioner's removal? And one of the possible considerations could be that you specify that criteria that you would consider for a removal. It could be additional violations that may occur, or it could just be attendance, or it could be a vote of the commission if the commission feels that that this person is unduly absent, or we can just leave it at 3 unexcused absences.
Well, if the commission were to vote like that, then it should come to the council for, since we're appointing people, we should also be involved in having them kicked off.
I agree with Councilman Ebner on that. My only concern with this particular issue, in my experience, is that sometimes, things happen, and I understand these people are volunteering their time. But I've also seen it where sometimes someone just doesn't make it. And I think there's unique circumstances for certain individuals sometimes, but repeated behavior is concerning. So I would agree with John that I think they need to be assessed. I just know the posturing in the past, we've had a hard time tracking. And I think that's something, as we go through this process, that we put the internal control in place to be able to track this more effectively, so we know, because it's hard for us to gauge if we never see it.
So the criteria currently is only centered around attendance or consecutive missed attendance. There really isn't any other criteria that would then lead to a potential removal. And so is there desire, I'm hearing, let's retain the criteria that's currently on the books. let's allow the committee to decide if there's cause to remove, and that would be ratified by the council. And does that appear sufficient for the council?
Well, the department liaison or department head that is related to that commission may also be, be observing things that, whatever it is, and it's hard, that's the problem, it's hard to specify. I mean, you could use disruptive behavior or,
But don't forget, there is excused absences.
Correct.
It says there.
Oh, yeah, definitely, for the absences. I think got that pretty nailed down.
So would the staff member be responsible for reporting to the city clerk the attendance?
Attendance should be documented in the minutes of the meeting of who was attending, and if there's an excused absence, we should document that there is an excused absence.
But the staff member is responsible for the minutes anyway, right?
Correct.
There has been a process in place where attendance tracking is done, and usually the department secretary or admin person who's doing the minutes, they, over the course of the year, they do keep track of the attendance, and they had been turning into me that information. It just was never used. So we do have a process in place where that information is gathered, and then it's just kept on file in my office for when someone wants to look at it and if it needs to be used to address an attendance problem.
I'm just thinking that in light of the number of applicants, the issue of attrition and turnover, that perhaps we should start looking at that or bringing that to council's attention, because if there is someone that is just, for whatever reason, unable to attend regularly, perhaps we should consider making a different appointment, someone that can commit.
And I would just, it's like progressive counseling or whatever you want to call it, that if a person is absent a couple times in a row, before we pounce on them with the third absence, say, hey, you've been absent these 3 times, or these 2 times, and, there is a policy, and what's up, and maybe they're just not calling in with an excuse that they could validly do. I mean, I don't know, but if whatever it is, whether it's disruption or tuning out of meetings when they're sitting there and just, zoning out, or whatever it is, counsel them to,
So I do have a temporary process in place leading up to this, where there are different letters that we can use to address certain situations. For, this is a warning, that type of thing. So there are things in place that are ready to be set up to put into motion if you guys okay these requests tonight.
I like that, and it's a formal process, so it's good to have. For myself, you might want to add, give me a call or give me an email saying so-and-so is on the verge of whatever, and because somebody should actually talk to the person, whether it's this council liaison or the staff liaison.
The letter before it would go out would go to the staff liaison and copy council, as well as the city manager.
All right. Then
before any notification goes out.
Right. I don't know how, rampant this problem really truly is. I can think of only one time on public safety that there was a concern about a member not calling in and stuff like that. I don't know about the senior commission or any other commission, but I believe it's a very minimal problem, but having something in place is definitely good for it. But so I'm very comfortable with the fact that the staff and Deborah will be able to track this in a manner that, but I do agree with John. Before we start sending hate mail that's really bad, we should probably contact whatever councilman is responsible for that and let us give them a call and say, hey, we need you to, wake up.
I just want to commend Deborah and the staff for this process too. I think as I reflected on last week's meeting, and then even this topic here, it's good to know there's a number of these processes in place that maybe just haven't been at the forefront, or at least since I've been on, I haven't heard them. So it's good to hear those are there. So thank you.
So I think your direction meets the tenor of trying to ensure regular and consistent participation. So 3 unattended absences, we would use the progressive notification process. And if the commission itself triggers a consideration of removing an individual, that would come before the council, be considered before the council before any removal occurred. Okay.
Yeah, it says 3 consecutive meetings. Guy misses 2, then he comes for 1, misses another, right shortly there without any kind of deal. That could be that's probably a talking to or something, because you could see that he knows that he or she knows that, if I miss 3 in a row, I'm out of here, but if I can I drop by and catch it, then I start my 3 over again. I think that's something that, like I said, I believe this is a very minimal problem, but since we're talking about it, I think we do need to figure out what we want to do with it.
In the scenario you just raised, the second one the council requested, I think addresses that, where if you have a pattern of 2 out unexcused, 1 in, 2 out unexcused, the commission can decide you're not meeting the tenor of participation, so we're going to make the recommendation to the council, and the council would have to take all the facts into account and decide, do we pull that person off?
Okay, I agree.
I will say, just in the spirit of this discussion, I agree with the mayor that if someone misses over half of their appointment, I don't know that person should continue to serve. And I understand, looking at that in the broader scheme of things, you're only talking about, 6 meetings 1 year and 6 meetings the next year.
On certain commissions.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's going to be somewhere down the line. What we got to figure out is with the slowness of what's been going on, I'm not so sure that I wouldn't be in agreement that all of our commissions start meeting once a month until we get back on track. And then people will know the date versus every other month. Sometimes it's unless you get that email or that text or a letter every other month, could be hard to keep track of. But that would be totally up to the people up here and the staff members. So, but I do know that, but I do know I have been contacted by several different commissioners who had that same belief that certain things should be on a monthly basis versus every other month.
Okay. If there's no changes in addition to that, the next item wasn't highlighted, but under the benefits section, Planning Commission was listed as $30 per meeting as a stipend. That was changed by the council, but not changed in the board and commission's handbook. It's actually $50 per meeting. And so we'll reflect that change in the final addition. The next highlighted item is ethics training. Currently, council members, planning commissioners, and other appointed advisory members of any body, and here's the key, who receive stipends or reimbursement for work-related expenses shall receive no less than 2 hours of ethics training every 2 years. Newly appointed advisory bodies should complete the required ethics training within the first 6 months. The goal, objective policy there would be ensuring that members charged with deliberating, recommending, and approving matters of public interest hold the highest ethical standards, understand meeting rules of order, and ensure a non-hostile working environment. The question before the council is, should the council add provision for requiring council, planning commission, and any other advisory body to be required to participate in training for meetings rules of order and sexual harassment in the first year of appointment and every 2 years? And there's a variety of options that could apply.
I'm supportive of the recommendation of staff and the application of this across the board, as well as the sexual harassment piece and the repeat training as well for every commission.
Irrespective of what stipends received by the individual. Okay. Is there any?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think that most of the people who've contacted us truly believe that this training is necessary, and I'd be very supportive of it.
Okay.
It's good with me. I'm good with that.
Okay. The next item is special meetings. The commission is on page 5. The commission may call special meetings to discuss an important issue that needs to be addressed outside the regular meeting date and time. I mean, under the Brown Act, that meeting could be called within 24 hours. The policy objective is to provide the ability for a commission to provide advice and recommendation on urgent matters in a timely fashion. The question before the council: does the city council want to in more detail describe how such meeting can be requested? And does the city council want to establish an order of precedence when such meeting is called, i.e. depending on the severity of an issue or some other parameter? Or do we leave it to just any time the commission chair wants to hold a meeting as a special meeting, they could hold that meeting? So you could define it as only the chair could request it, that the meeting could be called by the chair and 1 or 2 additional members, that the meeting may be called by any 1 or 2 members, or that the meeting may be called by any of the above with the concurrence of the liaison and or the city manager, are some example options you can consider.
Isn't the, if I'm not mistaken, for council, the mayor with another council member could call a special meeting? Is that correct, Jeff?
Either the mayor alone or 3 council members can call a special meeting. So the Brown Act specifically allows a majority of council to call a special meeting, or the mayor alone.
I wouldn't have a problem adopting a similar rule for them if the chair or 3 members. I'm trying to think the scenarios where that would apply, but I imagine each commission probably has a uniqueness that there may be things like I think seniors do trips, right? And there's a lot of planning that goes on in the senior commission for some of these events that occur, and even for parks, I imagine there may be something pressing that may call for a meeting.
I don't think it's ever happened.
Yeah, I can't, Dennis would know a lot more than I, but I certainly don't remember it. I don't know that they've ever had special meetings for senior trips. They've worked in Parks and Recs.
Public safety, for when CERT was going through its process, had some meetings and subcommittees that emerged on a topic at that time.
So
So it depends on how we're going. If we want to give a little more power to the chairs of these commissions, then that idea is probably a good way of doing it. Right now, or another way to make it kind of simple is just say any 2 people, or the chair and 1 other person, whether it's a staff because the staff may want to have a special meeting. And I'm sure the chair is pretty reasonable. In fact, if the staff wants a special meeting, as long as it's not, like 3 days from now and everybody's got to scramble to get on it, staff can probably just do it on their own. But if it's coming from it's almost like our putting things on the agenda. It's just 2 people. Just get 2 people,
I'm going to give the chair the ability to call a special meeting.
Well, I'd do the chair and 1 other person, so that, yeah.
I agree.
Or 2 commissioners themselves, or I don't know if the liaison should be involved at all, but probably stick with the commissioners, a couple of them. I don't know, is that easier to write in, or what do you think?
Let me just clarify, because I heard something conflicting. First I heard either the chair or 3 members of a commission. And then now I'm hearing the chair and 1 or 2 commissioners. So the reason this is up, not every item that's coming up before you is equal weight in terms of concern. I don't think we've had many special meetings historically. The concern becomes if you don't codify it, and all of a sudden you have somebody who decides to want to hold biweekly meetings of a commission, then staff, the agenda, and all the work occurs when there may not necessarily be a reasoning or rationale for that change. And so you could codify the chair and the staff liaison, or the chair and the commissioner, or 2 commissioners, or a majority of the commission, or some other variant of that. I would just ask that you define, ensuring that one person just can't call the meeting in absence of anybody else's concurrence.
That's where I'm going with the chair. So it's like the chair and the staff liaison. Say the chair wants to do it, get approval, or how many commission members if the staff doesn't want to do it, for example.
Right,
how many
and that would be the scenario that I think, like, I could go along with the chair provided they're elected by the body, and that gives them all the more reason to be consensus builder and what have you working among the commissioners with a staff liaison. But in the event that there's and maybe staff doesn't see the urgency or maybe a priority, or maybe it's just not aligned with council's direction or what have you, then I wouldn't be opposed if 3 other members, not to exceed the 4. I think that's below the Brown Act, right? So if they had 3 of them and you have 7, I think is our lowest number on these commissions after last meeting.
Staff should have the ability to call a special meeting too.
Yeah, and I can't believe that the staff would not consult the chair.
Right.
And say, hey, what do you think? This is what I got. So I think that's the minimum, is that staff and the chair should have that ability. Now, I have no problem if I have to believe that if two commissioners wanted to have a special meeting, I can't imagine the chair saying no, or I can't imagine the staff member saying no. Now, I understand what you want to do to codify it, but I think to come up with 3, I think that's
That's why I was saying kind of like any 2 out of that group.
So,
Talk about all the
Council-
commissioners and the staff, any 2.
so any 2 is not going to work under the Brown Act, because in order to call a special meeting, it has to be the chair or a majority of the body. So if you want to make it 2 commissioners, then the chair has to be one of those 2. So you can just say chair alone, or the chair and 1 commissioner, or the chair and 2 commissioners.
Or the chair and the majority. The chair or the majority.
That works too.
That wouldn't be hard. So it's if the chair generally does it, you know.
I'm okay with that. I
Yeah.
mean, it gives the chair a lot of authority, and I'm fine with that.
But and I would agree that yeah, it does. And if we hold their elected right by their colleagues there on the commission, I think that's a great opportunity and honor for that person.
So just to clarify, it sounds like following the Brown Act is where the council wants to go. So a chair can call it, a majority of it, whether the chair is a part of it or not. And then to Councilmember Bertone's point, or a staff person being able to call that. Is that sufficient, or do you want staff to have the concurrence of the chair to be able to call the meeting?
Technically, staff has to have the concurrence of the chair or a majority of the board.
Okay,
I mean,
let's-
this does not come up a lot, but technically, the staff has to have the
okay. So it's pretty clear.
Yep. That works. We got it.
I'd say it's pretty clear. Everybody in agreements with that?
Yep. Yes.
The chairs are the key vote. Okay,
So chair and staff liaison, or a majority of the board body.
right.
But I could see the staff having more of an opportunity to call
Yeah.
special meeting. Let's say the question is, there's some grant coming up, and we're going to get $100,000, and it has to be decided how we're going to use it. You may want to call your commission together to have them help you decide how to spend the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The staff member has to be intricately involved in it, and I'm quite sure they would be. All right, so you got it?
And it works, and the worry is if a chair doesn't want to hold a meeting, even if a staff person's requesting it, if, let's say, the grant example comes up and there's a deadline that we have, we wanted to get the advice of the commission before we apply or something, the alternative for the staff member is we agendize it at council, because the agendizing at council does not require the concurrence of a commission if there's a time-sensitive item at that point in time. I don't see that happening, but there has to be an avenue that staff can agendize an item for action by the governing body.
But I don't see how in what we've discussed here that you could not send out the question to the commission, board, or committee and have them respond back directly to you to get a quorum to have a meeting.
That's right. So if the chair didn't want to have the meeting, then the staff's second option is to contact all the board members. And if he gets a majority of them to want to hold a meeting,
You could do that.
then you hold the meeting.
Good point.
The third option would be to take it straight to council in a special meeting.
It's one of these things that's never happened here, and probably never will.
We hope not.
Until now.
The next item is informal public hearings, as opposed to the traditional formal public hearings. So this is an informal opportunity to give the public a chance to comment on a subject. The commission can set rules for notifying the public of an informal hearing, establish a time frame, and conduct the hearing in any fair way it chooses. And the objective here is to provide public input to the commission on matters within their purview. The question is, does the city council want to address the inconsistency between general public comment of a meeting and an informal public hearing, which is not required under the Brown Act?
So informal public hearing, is that just having an item on the agenda and people in the audience speak?
Well, the presumption, no, that it's something more than just an agendized item for discussion, that there is a more formality, but not to the level of a Brown Act public hearing like what you would hear at a planning commission. So I don't see the real value of that, because the commission's already defined how they address an agenda item, that there is public comment. Adding more of this type of formality is strictly within their purview as a commission. I just didn't know do you want to call it out as an informal public hearing, because I think it confuses the question.
Well, when we get into normal time, when people are back together and working together, in my experience with most of our commissions, they seem rather participatory in their format, is typically how most of the chairs, I think, run their meetings. So I don't know that we need to formalize this, to be honest with you, but I'm not opposed to if council has a different idea. But
What would be an example of an informal public hearing?
Well, that's the question. When you look at the premise here, the commission setting how they notify the public, well, the Brown Act defines how we notify the public of an agenda item. And so when you try to interpret what was meant by this section, it isn't very clear. Is this a regular item that's on the agenda and it's just, we call it informal public hearing? Or is this something more than that, but just not a formal public hearing? I don't know. And so that's the confusion that I would like to get some clarity to put in the handbook.
I think it's a gradation that is not necessary, because you have the agenda items, and typically, like Ryan says, the public, if there are any there, and a lot of times there's one or none, but they talk when the item comes up, or beforehand or after, or whatever. And then if there's an actual required public hearing, which I'm not sure if we've ever had one of those in one of our meetings, a required public. But having this other third thing in between does lend to confusion. So I just eliminate that terminology.
yeah, I wonder if it's a relic of the Public Safety Committee, not commission, back then, when there was consideration for the sheriff's station. I wonder if that was a time where maybe...
It might have been, because as we all know, that was the first time we ever did something like that, where a committee got involved in trying to, set us in a direction and to be able to advise it. So it very well could be, because unless I'm wrong, all our committees right now, it's in a published meeting, that everybody knows it's second or first or whatever, once a month. And every meeting I've ever been to, if somebody from the public came, the chair always acknowledged them, and when you started talking about issues. And so I don't know if all of this is even necessary.
Mayor, Council, could this maybe apply to subcommittee meetings? An informal public hearing?
There's a separate section on the subcommittees that doesn't really define a role. The presumption is that the committee appoints this ad hoc committee and says, here's your charge and here's how to operate. An ad hoc committee made up of the minority members of the commission, and my understanding is does not have to follow the Brown Act and can meet rather informally on a topic.
So this section could be applied to their meetings?
Well, it's in the same section as kind of the general rules for the commission. And so I don't know. We don't have a history, so we don't really know the intent, which is why I'm raising the issue.
Well, is there an implication for the only other commission I could think this could impact is planning or DPRB, right? They're the only ones that deal with some of that. Is there any implication there?
It's not necessary for Planning Commission or for DPRB to have these informal creatures.
Unless-
Like we said, Chris and I do not know where they came from. So.
Unless any member of staff has any recommendation otherwise, I would move to strike it and eliminate it from the manual. I don't see the purpose or relevance in today's.
Is there any opposition to that? Okay.
No opposition.
I'm not opposed to that, because I think it's,
Make it simple.
On the next page, page 6, we have hearing procedures. I think this is already addressed because the question centered around, do hearing procedures apply to both formal and informal hearings? Clearly, if you eliminated informal hearings, that wouldn't be a question anymore, so we could skip that one. In terms of the next item is agenda. Any member may include an item for commission discussion if agreed upon by the consensus of that commission. The Brown Act will govern aspects of the commission. The goal is to ensure concurrence by a majority of the commission for any proposed discussions and actions of the commission. The question before the city council is, does the city council want to require a vote to agendize a matter for a future commission meeting?
I got to tell you, I'm not opposed to the commission's functioning similar to council. If one other member is interested in a topic, I don't have an issue with them agendizing it. I think sometimes, to get consensus about a topic that may not appeal to the majority limits the discussion, whereas someone may not have been opposed to an idea at first, and then they participate and may come around.
I agree.
That'd be fine with me, yeah.
The only proviso I would add is that it's going to require a lot of staff time to address. I don't know if it's someplace else in here, but it's the idea that if it's going to take like several hours to research. No microphone, sorry, thanks. Yeah, if it's going to take a lot of hours to do it, then the staff may want to come to the city council if it's going to be a major thing. I mean, if it's 3 hours or 4 hours, I mean, I would leave it up to the staff liaison to say whether it's
why
reasonable.
wouldn't we just talked about this last 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, about if a council member wants the staff to do something, we look at it about an hour. Why would we make the subcommittees from the commission any longer than that before they come to the council?
I think this is the regular commission business, not the subcommittees that we're talking about. You're talking about regular commission agenda items, right? Or,
This would be the regular commission, and section 6 has a section on interaction with staff that discusses how do you request, how much time do you spend on it, and what's the process.
Mayor, I hear what you're saying in terms of the context of the time allotment, whereas I think what you're saying is a commission, if the council's request is limited at an hour, you're saying why would we allow for more time for a commission or a committee? Is that, am I understanding?
Yeah, that's basically it, because they, now the commission is instructing like the staff to do something that's going to take 3 or 4 hours or something. I just think that if they do that, then it has to go through the approval of the city manager or something.
I don't know if the not to get off the agendizing point, if you will. I'm okay with 2 members to agendize it. I think I agree with you that I'm not a fan of staff time taking over an hour for a commission. I do think, for the purposes of for our commitment to our commissions, that I'm not opposed to limiting the time consideration to an hour, because I think it's important that the commissions get the opportunity and benefit of staff doing some of the research. But I do think, though, in terms of agendizing, that if 2 members at a meeting agree to have something placed on the agenda, that comes at the following meeting, and you wouldn't even know what the workload is until the commission has that discussion and gives some direction.
Yeah, I have no problem with that at all.
that makes sense.
If I may just clarify, I don't think there's an issue with that's a great kind of treating this like the council does. You can request an agendized item. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a lot of work associated with agendizing. So if a Commissioner X requests, I'd really would like to talk about the condition of our trees throughout the city. It may be a one-paragraph agenda item that says, Commissioner so-and-so has requested discussion related to this. And when you get 2 members to say, I want to agendize it, we agendize it. At that next meeting, the discussion of the commission could center around providing direction to staff to do a much larger assessment. And later in the next page of the matrix, we'll talk about how do we balance that request. There's the hour recommendation for an hour, or weighing the request with the other priorities of the department and kind of making a cost-benefit recommendation on that. Because something like that may be something staff in Parks wants to take on and do. It may be several days worth of work, or it may be putting a proposal to go to council and get funding to bring in a consultant to do that work. You just let the commission and the staff liaison kind of decide on that. But a general hour of worth of work, I think, is very reasonable to ask of any commission if they make that request.
I see where you're getting at. I think that, say the commission, how many ever members want to put something on the next agenda, what comes back at the next agenda, where it's next meeting where it's actually on the agenda, should be more than kind of a free-flowing, nothing to hang your hat on, no bullet points or anything. Staff could come back with a brief. It would take less than an hour probably. Here's the considerations we might want to talk about. This is going to take a long time. We're probably going to have to go to the city council or not to get approval for it. But so that the commissioners at the next meeting at least know where they're going. Otherwise, you're doing 2 meetings of sort of just hazy, figure it out kind of stuff, and it's not till 6 months down the road when you're finally talking about it.
I think we leave some latitude, because you're right. I think staff can help define the matter that's at hand. I think the basis of the primary concern of this item is pick any commission and take 2 members or 3 members or a majority who decide to be extremely active as compared to every other commission, and we agendize one thing after another related to the department constantly. And so we end up with agendas with 8 items. And the commission decides on every item, we're going to direct staff to do work here, continuously. While I don't expect that to be a normal activity, the question for the council is, do you expect staff then to take that direction that could have a material impact on the department's priorities and to work on that request and information, or do you expect some other process to occur to define the parameters of how much work that those staff members should do? And that's not clear, because in our discussion at the last meeting, when we added the preamble to the boards and commissions and the desire that their recommendations and their considerations be given heavier weight and communicated and conveyed back to council, which also will affect priorities, a commission could materially affect a department's operations outside of the bounds of the city council and start moving the department in a certain direction that may not be where necessarily the department head desires, nor the council, and that would occur without any concurrence of council. And that's the question: is that kind of direction something you are okay with?
Chris, that's a fascinating point you make. I think there's a balance that has to be struck with this. I'm 75% to where John's at. I agree 100% with his thought process and laying out how it occurs. I find sometimes even here, when we have a discussion about potentially agendizing something, I think we sometimes really try to lay out the framework or the context of what any one of us would like to see for the next meeting. But I think sometimes staff is like trying to pull things out of thin air to put something together for us for the next meeting to frame a discussion. And I think somewhere in there, there's a balance that, if we just want to get it on the discussion to talk about it, then I look forward to all of us putting our fingerprints on it to try and mold the discussion of the body, if you will. But I do agree with John's premise that there needs to be a starting point for that discussion. And I don't know that you spend a whole lot of time, and I think at the last meeting we discussed that the end result is an advisory recommendation, if you will, back to council at some point is the hope, or to weigh into staff. So any work that you may be doing or would be doing, I think is a research type of function, or surveying perhaps, or even community engagement to a certain degree. I'm concerned about framing it too much on the front end to not allow the whole body to weigh in. But I also agree that there needs to be a framework for the next meeting in something that maybe doesn't take an hour to frame out, or takes an hour, but isn't fully cooked.
And I think I have a solution to the idea of it being overwhelming. So say some commission is just going wild. They've got members on there for whatever reason that want to put 5 things on next meeting's agenda, and then they've got another 5. That's where the staff liaison or director or whoever would ask you, Chris, to put it on the city council agenda. We've got this commission, they want this, and this. We all realize they can't do all those, the staff can't do all those things. And so we're going to help prioritize, and maybe with your suggestions and the director. So that's if it starts going off the rails scenario. Otherwise, if it's a one-off, every now and then they want to, every meeting they want to put one thing on the agenda, setting out a framework for the next meeting, just bullet points, not a ton of research, but just kind of knowledge that staff has or whatever, so they can have a reasonable discussion about it.
That makes sense, and it's not the number of the agenda items per se, because we could have 12 items on an agenda, and based on our training and experience, discuss them with the commission. It doesn't take a whole lot of work, it just takes time at the meeting. It's when those 12 items become, now we want to direct you to do work on every single item,
Right.
That's the impact. And so I think what we can do, and let me run this by you, we train our staff liaisons when an agenda item is requested to frame the parameters of that agenda item. To the extent that's reasonable, that the staff person in agendizing that item to provide some level of detail, sufficient level of detail that is a balance between workload and information, to frame the discussion at the next meeting. And then the commission at the next meeting, when they direct additional work, that's weighed amongst all the priorities and the amount of requests coming from that commission. And if it becomes onerous, the pathway through the city manager could be to the council to address how far would you like us to go in terms of the workload.
Chris, I like that. The only thing, and I agree with what John's saying and how we frame it, I think what we're all hope is that the commissioners have a productive next meeting. But look, let's be honest, all of us up here at some point have given a second to something that we may have been half into, but we were being respectful because we want to hear what each other have to say. And I would not want a commission to have staff do a huge amount of time for something that I just wanted to hear my colleague in this forum and may or may not wish to go once we have the discussion. So I just hope there's, discretion from staff to do it. And it sounds like, I think you understand, at least that's my feeling about it. I sometimes, all of us have brought forward things that maybe are non-starters or halfway starters, and then we don't get too far with it, but at least we indulged each other, heard each other out, and were respectful. I don't want to limit a commissioner's ability to thrive and bring forward ideas for a body to consider. And they could be a minority voice on a commission, and they get one other person perhaps, and maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't, but I want them to be able to voice it, and I want a commitment from the city to explore.
I believe that's good guidance for the staff liaisons. I think that's very doable.
My experience is sometimes when a commissioner suggests something, the staff member will say, well, I will bring that up at our next directors meeting. And that's where the decision can be made.
That too, I think you address the issue of the agendizing and making it the same as what the council has on an item. I think the rest, the mechanics, and the best way to bring it forward, if we operate in good faith that we value our commissions and want their input, and balance that with the decisions of staff and the council, I think we'll be fine. I don't expect this to be, I'm not foreseeing a common problem. This is really the exception to the rule, and didn't know, I wanted to make sure we had the clear guidance to advise our liaisons. So, good. The next item that's highlighted is the Political Reform Act. Specified individuals are required to annually disclose all their financial interests that may be affected by decisions made in their official capacity, specifically applying to city council and planning. Commissioners must disqualify themselves from making or participating in making or influencing any governmental decision that will have a foreseeable material financial effect on any economic interest of the member or certain family members. The policy objective here is to ensure compliance with public disclosure laws and providing impartial and unbiased decision-making. The question before the council: does the city council want to require an expansion for any other commissioners that are able to make or influence a governmental decision? So in the case of not planning commission, for example, let's say public safety or parks, where we are going to be considering their advisory recommendation that may have some level of influence on staff and the council, the question is, do you want to require them to be filers like the council and the planning commission? It will increase the workload on the city clerk and city manager's office. However, it would put those commissioners on par with the rest of the commission and the council. Is that something you would desire?
What do other communities do?
It's a mix, because some commissions have, like Parks Commission, that have statutory authority, and so therefore they would be required to then file a Form 700. The question here is, we're not granting statutory authority to these commissions, but we are saying we want to take your advisory recommendation, hear about it, hear why staff's not going with your advice for us to consider at the council level. So the question before you is, do you believe that that could influence the decision? And if it does, do you believe that therefore anybody who's involved in that advisory vote should be not conflicted in that respect? It's not required, it's just an option.
They wouldn't be required to fill out any forms or anything. This is just, I think, something that should be understood. No?
They would be required to file Form 700s and be designated a certain filer.
I don't see any, myself, I don't see any reason why our commissions, other than those that are already statutory, planning commission, and I just don't see where we have to have commissioners fill out the 700 form. Now the question would be, if we're going to have them participate in these training and ethics things, now is that going to trigger us that maybe we should have them do the 700 form? But I certainly don't see the need. But that would be a question, I guess maybe for Jeff, if we were going to have them do the ethics and the ABCD, if whatever it is.
Well, the commissioners don't make those kind of decisions usually. But they would have to fill out the 700 forms. I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to give them ethics training and AB 1234 training, that doesn't mean they have to do Form 700s.
Okay,
They're disconnected issues. But the other thing I would note is that the commissioners do still have to recuse themselves, whether they file Form 700s or not. They do still have to recuse themselves if they're going to talk about or they're not going to talk about an issue at their meeting that involves their financial interests.
And that would come at some point during training, that they would be told this when, actually could, before the AB, all of that type training and stuff. I just don't see any need to have a commissioner fill out a Form 700 form. I think we all know what an onerous job that is sometimes. So I'm not encouraging. I would vote it. My view is no.
Deborah, do you have any thoughts on this particular issue?
My personal preference is with all of this, I like the uniformity of, if it's something council is doing, I think it should be applied to our commissions. And if they are going through and we are requiring them to have all of the other training, while this is not required, I don't think it hurts to have them do this. It's sort of a package to me. It's sort of a package process and concept. And I think it just reinforces more to them what their obligations and what their duties are if this was required.
I thank you for the perspective. I'm wondering if the so one example that comes to mind for me, and I do agree with the mayor, and it sounds like the majority of council. I don't know that this is something we need to require. I think the ethics training is going to provide that opportunity for our commissioners to become more aware. But I do think it's worth pointing out, and to Jeff, your point, if there's discussion in the future, for example, Eric's now commission, equestrian, to become involved with overseeing the Sycamore Equestrian Center, many of them are boarders. And so I wonder, I'm not necessarily saying there's a 700 issue here, but I think the AB 1234 training may be effective in assisting those individuals through that type of scenario, in my mind.
The city attorney had mentioned an earlier provision made it very clear that you can't participate in or be a part to anything that could do a direct or indirect benefit. And so in the training, of course, the formalized training as well as the additional training will make it very clear. The scenario of the equestrian center would be, I am a boarder on the commission and staff's asking us to review and consider something. It wouldn't be, are they compliant or not? It would be, there's an operational issue and we need to determine what is best management practice for how operations should occur. And so that doesn't necessarily then cross that border into a conflict position unless they're strongly advocating for something that is very clearly out of the bounds that any normal person would look at and say, that's clearly just because you want to benefit from it, which shouldn't be the case if it's teed up well by staff. The question of the Form 700, and the city attorney can expand on this, is if we did go the extra step and say, you're now a filer, so you have to file Form 700s, we designate you as a filer, and you disclose your interests, and then that commissioner does something that he has or she has a direct interest in. The question for the city attorney is, does it increase the liability on that individual by the fact that we enhance the requirements on them?
No, they have the same liability whether they disclose their financial interest or not.
Okay.
So, I mean, so the commissioner almost benefits from filing a 700 by being more mindful and aware of their potential conflict rather than waiting to see if it comes up type of thing. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Fair point. It gets them thinking about what are their financial interests because they have to sit there and think and write them down.
I think that when an issue comes up, like we're saying might be a conflict, at that point, a commissioner would if we're using the 500 feet rule or whatever rules we would have in place, or, I'm a part owner of that business or whatever, I think it comes up at that time. Kind of like we're saying, it's really two different things. 700 form and the conflicts, they don't necessarily require each other. So I'm just thinking, just the 700 form is just one more thing for them to do, and I don't know if they really need to fill that out.
Well, if most of them don't have anything to report, it's not that difficult for them to do it. It's a one-page document.
The 700?
If I remember correctly, it's only, they don't
If
need to
there's-
report
yeah.
their residence. They only need to report a financial interest within the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So if they don't have a business or anything like that, their homes are not required. So they would just fill out the first page and sign it, that there's nothing in the schedules.
So, and there's some financial obligations
Gifts.
too, if there are stocks or ownership in businesses in the city or something like that. But for the for the most part, again, if most people don't have anything, then it's just the one page that they're filling out.
I'm not hearing Deborah, and having just gone through this exercise a couple weeks ago, I'm warming up to the idea, to be honest with you.
Warming up to the idea of what?
Just having them fill out the 700.
I
don't think it's a necessity, but I think it's prudent.
well,
But I'm not championing it. I'm okay.
I certainly respect Deborah's opinion because she deals with it every day. But this is just something that I just don't really think it's necessary to subject our commissioners in their mind, if it was really this type of deal. But we've never had this issue, and hopefully we don't have an issue. But I think that personally, I just assume not put that requirement on them, and because we're already going to now require them to go through ethics training and
I would agree with them.
So I would discourage it, but I'll certainly respect whatever the rest of the council wants to do.
I'm kind of open either way, but I think the crux of it to me is that whatever recommendation that they give, ultimately it's going to come back to us, and we're going to be the decision makers,
Right.
theoretically. So the decision as to whether something that could benefit somebody goes through is still up to us.
Right, it's advisory, and for that reason, I respect the mayor and Dennis and the body on this particular issue. I'm indifferent on it.
Yeah, I'd say let's not require it.
Okay.
That
Sounds
would
like
be my
no.
suggestion. If you want to clarify that, Chris,
I'm sorry?
do you need to clarify and you understand where we're going?
No, very clearly, while they're required not to be conflicted in any participation, we're not going to, and if they're required to go through the trainings, we are not going to formally require them to disclose their financial interests as akin to the Form 700s. So that's very clear.
That's just the way, that's my comfort zone on this particular thing.
Nope, that's the clarity we wanted. Since we're going through the whole handbook, we wanted to address key areas.
And comfort zone, I think the commissioners in the past that I've seen, I think everybody's doing what we expect them to do as we've appointed them. So comfort is a good word that I believe our training is where we're going.
Right, and we're all, plus I'm sure that majority of the community believes that we're on the right track as far as requiring training, and so I'm ready to move on.
Okay, so we're on page 7 under section 6. And the council has already started to discuss this area. Interactions with staff. The current handbook reflects that the commission should not attempt to direct or decide the priority of work, a city department or the individual staff person. That the commission should contact city staff on official business through the staff liaison assigned to the commission. That the commission should consider proposals and recommendations of city staff, but the commission may choose to agree or disagree with a staff recommendation. In the case of disagreement, staff has the option of including the staff recommendations in a staff report to the city council, and will discuss differences in the opinion at the city council meeting. This reflects what the council desired at the last meeting. In the event of conflict between a commission member and staff person, the member will pursue a progressive approach to mediate the conflict. First to the commission chair, then the department head, and then finally the city manager. The chair should approach the staff liaison to assist in conflict resolution if the chair is unable to resolve the conflict. The question before the council is, does the city council want to provide more guidance on defining how the commission requests staff work on matters before the commission? I think what you were discussing earlier falls in line with what's written here as a potential option. So codify the practice that any commission can request information and research on a matter that either does not result in more than roughly an hour of staff time or is weighed by the appropriate department head against priorities, workload, and fit with the recommendations city staff is considering for city council. At any time, the city manager or department head may bring a request to the city council for review and consideration. I think that's in line with what you mentioned earlier.
I believe so.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with that.
Is there any opposition to that?
No.
Okay.
These highlighted areas are getting bigger.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail in those sections. That's why they're larger. I try to summarize as short as I can. The next one is interaction with the city council. A commission is primarily responsible to advise and make recommendations to the city council. As council must see broader context, it may not always follow the recommendations of a commission. In the case where the city council and commission positions are in disagreement, the commission or individual members should not do anything contrary to the established policies and programs adopted by the council. Except for planning commission, a council member shall be assigned to a commission as a liaison. Liaisons attend meetings, but except for golf course advisory and DPRB, are not voting members of the commissions. Commission business transacted with the city council should be in writing from the body as a whole and forwarded through the city staff, who will then forward it to the city manager. City manager will review all reports, findings, and recommendations and forward to the council those matters within the council's province. When commission members address the city council, the member should make clear whether the member is speaking as an individual or on behalf of the commission. Commission members should not attempt to predict city council action, publicly or privately, but they may interpret policies or identify trends in city council thinking. The overall objective here is considering perspectives of the commission as a whole in the city council's deliberation and decision-making process. The questions before the council: does the city council want to reconsider the role of a council liaison? I know that was something that had been discussed. And does the city council want to specify more explicitly how a commission would authorize a member to speak on its behalf? And there are several possible options if you so choose to make any change.
Well, first of all, I like the idea of a council liaison. Is there anybody who does not want to have council liaisons to the commissions? Yeah, I think we all like that idea. It's just another way of interacting with the people.
Right, but with that saying, though, I believe that we as council liaisons need to be very cautious that we're not guiding them to our own agenda. Okay, that is a concern of mine. You sit with 5 or 6 people and they're looking to see what you're thinking. Okay, we want to hear what they're thinking. So I will tell you, and to be honest with you, John, within the last couple of weeks, I actually had considered talking about no council liaison, let the staff work with the commissions, then the commissions come to us. But I put that aside already, so not realizing I probably wouldn't get that support, but I just see the fact that the commissions kind of go with the mindset of whatever that liaison is, and that is a concern, but I hope we all understand that, or at least I know I understand. The fact is, I want to hear from the commissions. I want to hear what they're suggesting. So that's where it's at.
Right. And that's why I think most of us, at least when I'm a liaison to a commission, I listen to what they're saying and do not participate. Sometimes a question will come up, well, when did the city council do this? What's the name of that park over there?
Sure.
What, that kind of stuff. But generally, we're not voting, and the Parks and Rec Commission, anyway, has generally taken direction from the Parks and Recreation Department. And it was Teresa Bruns, and it was Hector, and any kind of change in what they were doing seemed to be reflective of the person that was the staff person, rather than... Now, if they were doing things that I liked, well, that's just because they were doing things I liked.
Yeah,
It wasn't me directing them or anything.
I certainly understand it, but I just believe, and I think we all understand, we need to hear from what they're thinking. we can answer questions, we can do this, but
Give them information. Sometimes
Yeah.
they need information. like,
Right.
Well, that was brought up 2 years ago, and this is what the council decided. Do you want to
Right.
pursue it again? But it was decided,
Yeah.
this way.
not where everybody knows that, God, I really like this particular thing, and they're here, and that I really like this, so, but a couple of them might be saying, well, I got a different option here. But, I know that the mayor or a councilman this is one of his pet babies, and I don't want to, I want them to be thinkers. I want them to be independent thinkers coming to us with their suggestions.
I will say that I too struggled with the notion of the liaison position a little bit in the last couple weeks for the same concern. I think when we're respectively the liaison, we take ownership over the respective commissions. I mean, we feel, that's my commission. You're invested in them. But I was toying too with the idea of if we got rid of the formalization of the liaison, that doesn't mean that we can't attend the meetings. And I find myself looking at it, well, it's like Parks and Rec. Well, I know John's going to be there, so I don't need to worry about it per se. But at the same token, if there was not a designated liaison, I probably would be more likely just to drop in. But I also know that sometimes the mayor will pop in. And I know Kurt used to pop into a lot of the various meetings here and there. And without knowing who was going to be at the meeting, if we have a liaison, I automatically know the designated liaison is going to be there. And then I call Emma and say, hey, are you going? Or are 3 of us going to be there? And I have to play that game. So I'm okay either way. But I do think if we did not have a liaison, then it gives the opportunity for each council member to show up to whatever commission of interest they have, and be able to get some perspective. I mean, I interviewed for Senior Citizens Commission way back when with Dennis and with the mayor, and I laughed, when I didn't get the appointment, unfortunately.
You're not old enough.
Yes, I was not old enough, as it was made clear to me. But I was surprised to learn that they're the most active commission, in terms of doing things in the city. And I wouldn't have known that otherwise. So I'm just saying there's opportunity to learn. There's a lot of commissions and a lot of different people on those commissions that bring a lot to the table. And I think it may help us be more well-rounded if we were able to, in our own roles, go. And nothing precludes us, I understand, from going anyways, which is why I don't think it's a big deal.
I like I said, I toyed with this idea. I've pretty much set it aside, and that. But I would encourage all of us to reach out to other commissions and attend. I can tell you that I haven't had to worry about it too much because of COVID since March of last year, but I can certainly tell you that I went to other commission meetings as a council person, and I was greeted by, God, it's nice to see you here, and that's it. And I know that Ryan said, how active our senior commission is, and it certainly is. But I also believe that all the talking about our commissions that we've been doing, and we're re-looking at this, I'm pretty confident that all our commissions are going to be that active type deal. I remember hearing, I think, Jan Bartolo during the meetings that we've had a couple months ago, talking about what the Parks and Rec were looking for. They're looking at the urban forest, they're looking at this, they're looking at that. So those are all things that are good, positive things, but the best part of this is that we're going to start hearing from the Equestrian Commission, because we have Eric there now. That's
right.
He got his dictionary out, and he looked what a horse was.
It was on his campaign signs.
Yeah. So I'm happy with moving on.
So it sounds like there's no issues in terms of how it's framed. So
I personally have no.
The second question was, does the council want to specify more explicitly how a commission would authorize a member to speak on its behalf? And so one of the possible options was to restrict to the chair only, or to have some formality to the commission directing somebody to come speak on their behalf. Is there some more specificity the council would like in how that communication occurs?
I, for one, have no problem with the chair coming and talking to us. I, for one, have no problem if the commission appoints somebody, and I don't know that we have to have a real big formal policy on that.
I think the only thought I have is, when we write a letter, like tonight, there's a letter of opposition, the body considers the communication, and then let's do it. That's the message the body wants to convey. I just would hope that however this works, if it's the chair or what have you, that the message, the body
represents
the body, the voice of the body.
The other thing to consider, the staff liaison is a conduit from the commission back to the council. City staff, especially through a staff report, if recommendations were made or information was provided, is a conduit back to the council. And so really what you're looking at is, outside of that, what type of communication that's coming from the commission may not pertain necessarily to a recommendation that was made or discussions. And so do you want to frame that in how that should come forward to you? Should it come forward to you in more formality, like, hey, the commission wants to convey to the council concern about 3 areas. Chair, please relate that to them. Or Commissioner number 2, please relate that on our behalf to them.
It could be any of those things. So if in your first scenario, the commission wants to convey some information to the council that for some reason isn't getting there, or they don't feel it's getting there, then I think leave it up to the commission. I mean, do they all want to sign it? Do the chair want to sign it? Does the chair want to come and talk? Keep in mind that the chair rotates every year in, I think, all the commissions. And so you may have a commissioner who has only been chair for a month or since last week, when the previous chair knew the whole history. So I'm not saying maybe multiple people know it, and they may pick the one who knows the most about it. I could imagine back in the days when Carol Smith wanted the dog park, that nobody else, they're not going to nominate anybody else to come and talk about the dog park except Carol Smith. She was a member of the commission after she presented that idea and eventually got approved and everything. But yeah, so I think leave it up to the commissions. I don't think we need to define that really specifically.
I'll just, I kind of agree with what John's saying. I think the only thought I have is when we look for opportunities for the commissions to engage, or at least to feel engaged, that this could be an opportunity for the chair to have a meaningful duty that maybe otherwise just wasn't there. And so I'm not opposed to staff bringing the reports forward and presenting them, but I almost like the idea of having the commissioner, as it's been done in the past, or like even Jan calling in, come and provide the information. I think it lends itself to that real feeling that we are, in fact, engaging our commissions. They have stake in the game, and we're taking the time to listen to them. I think sometimes when, and no offense to staff, but sometimes when staff, you read a report and it's like Charlie Brown, you just womp, 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 and then it's like, and it just kind of, you skim, you go through it. I'm not saying we're not listening. I'm just saying,
Sorry, Henry, Sherry, and everybody.
Well, I'm just saying it breaks up the monotony for everybody, I think, to sometimes have a different person present. That's all I'm saying. And I love you all. You're doing great work.
But I agree with it. We talked about that. Having the chair come and do the semi-annual or annual report is the best option, in my opinion, because, they're right there. I certainly agree with that.
I think we need to get them involved as well as we get our staff involved. Our staff, off on a whole different subject real quick. Our staff comes in, gives us a report on an issue that's on the blotter, on the agenda. I personally would like to see our staff come in and give us a report on what they're forecasting for the future for their section. So, like I said, it's not something that's here right now, but we're talking about reporting and stuff like that. But you know what? I'd like to hear Henry tell me about planning department. Okay, what is on the horizon, where we're going, okay? Not just come in and talk about just an issue that day, okay, or what's on the agenda. Okay, and that brings up another subject. When you look at planning commission, okay, and I mentioned this, and I'm not even sure that it goes right here, but planning commission goes through the hearing process and they make a recommendation, okay? I want to hear from the planning commission. I don't want to see 2 minutes of planning commission and it goes back to staff that staff totally disagrees with. So we get 2 minutes saying the commission voted this way. But this is how we do it. And so you got 45 minutes here, 5 minutes here. I think the commission has to have the ability to be on a level playing field. And sometimes that, I can't tell you I've seen that recently, but I can tell you I've seen it in the past. So, especially I was the chair and I watched them, and I've had commissioners come up to me even as late as a year ago over a project off of Allen Avenue and said, well, God, why did we even come to the meeting? Nobody listened to us. Nobody even heard us. So that's where I kind of see how we want to get people involved. We've got to make sure they feel involved.
And I agree with the engagement that, case in point, the Equestrian Commission on the Foothill project had a recommendation of SF 16,000. And when staff presented it, I mean, it was presented, the recommendation, but if you would have been at the Equestrian Commission meeting and you heard the commissioners talking about their passion for the equestrian issues and why it was important, it's a little bit different than hearing it when we just read it in the report, when you're hearing it from, whether it's a park issue, whether, whatever it is. That's why I personally would like to see the commissioner or the chair or whomever, their delegate, come, on a night like that.
If I may, because I'm hearing a couple of things that are aligning. The question really before the council is really, do you designate or request a designation of somebody from the commission, like the chair? And so that when a matter like the planning commission and the mayor mentioned comes forward where the staff reports are public, the commission chair presumably would be reviewing the item they had recommendations on that went forward, and they may not believe that the staff member related the adequate detail of the discussion at planning commission. So I believe, and based on what you're saying, you agree that the chair of the commission should be able to come forth to the council meeting and convey on behalf of the commission the tenor of the conversation that may be in more detail that you may see in a staff report, so that you can take all that information together and be able to say, you know what, there's more to this, maybe we refer it back, or maybe we go with the commission's recommendation instead of a staff recommendation. That's really the question, is do you want to require that at least at the commission level they designate that person to speak, not any member of the commission that can come forth and say, I was there at the commission and I'm relating what we discussed, but they're not the chair, they weren't designated, they weren't the person that everybody agrees should be the one that comes forth, is the question.
I believe that the body needs to designate a person to do it. Yeah. My beliefs. I
agree with the mayor.
And it could be the chair, but maybe the chair is not comfortable at that point in time with that subject matter, and do you feel? So I just think a designee of that commission.
That's exactly what we needed to understand, and it doesn't sound like there's any opposition to that.
Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Perfect. We only have a couple more items to go. Interaction with the public. This is on page 8. Commission members should be aware of public opinion related to their field of influence, welcome citizen input at meetings, and ensure rules are followed. Members should be fair, understanding, impartial, and gracious, and considerate of all interests, attitudes, and differences of opinions. Members should not accept gifts from applicants or other persons who concern matters that might be before the commission. Our policy objective centers around utilizing broad consideration of public input and opinion in a fair and impartial manner to facilitate commission discussion. The question for the council is, does the council desire to provide guidance on members making public or private statements, including in a public medium, that may be perceived as representing official city policy or the perspective of a commission? And so there are some options here, but based on the action you just we recommended on the first part, you could allow this with the designated individual or some other variant that you consider.
I like that, and recently I saw somebody who's a member of the housing subcommittee made a video that I thought was very informative. And on that video, they had put a note, and it read something to the effect of, I'm speaking as an individual, not on behalf of the city or the commission or what have you. It was very clear and concise that individual was speaking in their own private capacity as a person. On the flip side, I heard the concerns of Dennis and others at the last discussion about this, and I think there's a balance is not to restrict the commissioners from being able to say what they wish to say in their free speech, but at the same token, understand, in light of what we just discussed in terms of the voice of the body, that the voice of the body is represented in whatever it is they vote or they pass or they delegate to that authority of the chair or the representative to come before council as the official voice of the body. But as a commissioner, I'm okay with, in my personal opinion, a framework for them to be able to make a distinction whether or not they're speaking from their hat as a city commissioner in line with the voice of the body of whatever that was, or even maybe their own dissension perhaps on a particular issue, or as a private person, but not dragging the city into it, and referencing the city or the city's name, right? So,
Can I clarify what you're saying, just so I understand it?
frame me, go.
That if a commission designates an individual to speak on its behalf to council, that person is designated to speak on behalf of that commission.
Yeah.
And if an individual desires to speak about work of the commission, that they clearly convey that what they're communicating is solely the views of them as an individual and not the commission nor the city.
Right, and I think, I think there was, to frame the context of this just a little bit more, is that if a commissioner is wearing their pin or anything that identifies them as, being a representative of the city, and they go out and they, are having a rage, some sort of wild, statements that are, on profanity and just wildness. I mean, I would hope that somewhere in this discussion point right here, that we've put some framework around the expectation of the communication and the individual being a representative of the city and the commission, which I think was laid out in some of the earlier discussion points. But at the same token, you can't, I don't feel that someone should be able to go out, if there's any way to affiliate them with the city, is that if they're completely unidentifiable, they're not claiming to be a commissioner, and they want to talk about whatever they want to talk about, so be it. It's just in those instances where they're appearing to be or have professed to be in that role, right? So,
Well, people should make it clear if they're speaking on behalf of the city, speaking on behalf of the commission, or speaking on behalf of themselves.
right.
If they're speaking on behalf of themselves, then they should be really unlimited in what they could say. But as long as they make it clear that this is my opinion, not the city council's opinion or not the commission's opinion, that's what I believe.
I agree with that.
So just the mechanics of that, spiders right here. Just the mechanics of that. So if somebody says to another person, they're at dinner or they're at High Point and there's a lot of people around and everybody's talking loudly, and somebody says, I think we need more trails, or that kind of thing. I believe that the word I think indicates that it's their thoughts. So I don't think they have to go and say, now this isn't what the city necessarily has authorized me to say or anything like that. So I'm just wondering where that, where the being clear you're not representing the city necessarily, and maybe you will, but that you aren't. Where is that? Is I think enough, or do you have to be like the video you're talking about, where that gentleman went on and on about how many times I don't know how many times he said he didn't represent the city necessarily.
Right. I agree with what you're saying in that setting, in that scenario. I think until it's clear there's a nexus, I guess that's the point, is the point there becomes a nexus between their service and the issue, then maybe that's the distinction. But if there's no nexus discussed, it's just you're talking about you happen to be a commissioner or you happen to be this, and you're talking about what have you, that it's clear. But I think, the other issue contemporaneous to all of this is how information's presented. So when the information, as I talked about a little bit ago, was presented recently, there was a disclaimer that was abundantly clear. I'm not speaking on behalf of, the city or the commission or whatever. There's not a shadow of a doubt, how that is. And I don't know that was entirely necessary, but at the same token, it made the point clear where that person was speaking from. And I think that was clear because people, when they see it, go, okay, well, he's just speaking on behalf of himself or herself, right? And I think that's a good thing. It's clear for everybody.
And if I may, what I saw at previous council meetings was really, I've seen questions asked by council members, well, are you speaking on behalf of the organization or speaking on behalf of the commission? It's like, no, I'm not. So I think, to your point, Councilmember Ebner, the last thing we're expecting is to mechanically write down, anytime you're a member of a commission and you're speaking to anybody, you must first start by saying, I now preface my comments at, no. I think the distinction is, if I'm a member of the Equestrian Commission and I say, I'm really concerned about the operations of the Equestrian Center, that in isolation is one thing. The second scenario is, I have 30 years experience in horse boarding, and I'm a member of the Equestrian Commission of the City of San Dimas. There is concerns of the following. So invoking the city's commission, even though you're not explicitly saying they believe, is giving an aura of it could represent the position of the commission or the city if you replace commission with city. And I think the language, if you desire, could be that any commissioner or anybody not specifically designated to speak on behalf of the commission should take reasonable measures to ensure that any statements that may be construed as being on behalf of the commission are clearly delineated as statements of the individual, not the commission. So more of the negative as opposed to requiring somebody to constantly be telling
I'm okay with that.
folks, I'm not.
I agree with that too.
Yeah, I'm
So
okay
if
with
that's
that.
what you desire, we could try to frame that language so when you see it, you can see, oh, that's pretty clear. If I'm just going to speak, we're not muzzling somebody from speaking.
Right.
We're just saying, if you try to do anything that connects this to this, just be clear that you're speaking for yourself.
Well,
unless-
an example in that gray area is somebody asks an equestrian commissioner, conversation goes like this. There's problems, let's just pick on a commission, and I won't say equestrian commission. There's problems in this area. Somebody says to the commissioner, aren't you a member of that commission, that whatever commission, name the commission? The other person says, yes, I am, and we're looking into those. I mean, she's making a statement that's true, but he's not really giving an opinion. He's just saying what's happening, and he's not saying, well, it's not. It would be kind of funny to say, well, I'm not speaking on behalf of the city, but I think we're looking into it or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So I would err on the side of reasonable interpretation of everyday conversation, what it might be. Now, when somebody's talking to the news media, that's a slightly different scenario where, and the news media should know this. I mean, it just should know it. But if they're talking to a commissioner, you should make a comment of some kind, this is my personal opinion or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree with what Councilmember Ebner is saying, that, I think there's a distinction between the media at all, social media, news media, the evolving definition of media, and then informal communications between people in public through the course of their interactions in the community. I don't think we want to prohibit or inhibit a commissioner or committee member or board member from being able to do their duties that we expect them to do with interacting with members of the public. But I do think when statements get put out, and that's really the crux of it, and I think a lot of government organizations frame this in some way towards what you were describing, that those are the communications we need to be mindful of.
That's good direction. I can make sure we draft the language that reflects that. Okay. The second to last item, or actually the last item before a catch-all, is effective conflict management. That's on page 9. Really, the crux of this is to address if in any case there's some kind of conflict or dispute or problem occurring at the commission, what should we codify the process or how to address it? I think earlier in the handbook, there was a individual dealing with the chair first, and then the department head, and then the city manager. And so we can mirror that language to reflect any dispute that's occurring within a commission, with the ultimate ending point being the city council. Or do we just leave it silent and not address what happens if a conflict occurs on a commission? Do we just let people deal with it at the commission?
Is there any need to change from what we already have in writing? Has that been effective over time, or have we had to use it?
We don't really have anything in writing to address this.
This isn't
Oh,
effective.
I'm sorry.
what
I'm
page?
sorry. I'm thinking of
It's
forms and documentation.
attachment B, page 26.
Yeah. We never had to use that, so I don't know that I could really speak to how well it works or doesn't work.
I think
But you're saying it looks like it outlines a good process.
if it's not broke,
Don't fix it.
Okay. Just making sure you're okay with that language as written.
it's worked this long.
Okay, and the last item is really for items that are not, so when we do policies and promulgate policies, we're really looking at higher level and not necessarily going really detailed. But over time, operationally, to ensure consistency, adding some specific detail, implementing those policies become beneficial. The question with the last one really relates to that. And if we wanted to expand upon a direction of the council and operationalize that, but want to codify it in the board handbook, should every little change come to council to get a review and approved, or should somebody be designated to be able to implement those consistent with the policies passed by the council in the handbook?
And who might that somebody be?
That would be the city manager.
I just thought I'd ask.
How often do you expect that kind of?
I've been trying to bring as much to the council as possible because I appreciate the discussions,
We noticed.
but I'm a very big policy procedure person, so internally we've been codifying and starting to document and go into details about what's the procedure and implementing that policy, but I want to make sure that if the council wants to see that, that's fine, but I don't want to bury you in constantly adding procedures that relate to everything in the board and commission handbook, unless you desire it.
I'm okay with, personally, I'm interested in this because it really is the one way for members of the community to serve, and I think it's important for council to maintain a level of awareness. My personal preference would be to see any updates, even if it was a consent calendar type of update. I just would like to see it, just to know, even if it was some sort of spot cleanup type thing. That's my personal preference, but I'm not married to that.
That's what I was going to say too, is I don't mind changes being made where they need to be efficiently is essentially what we're talking about, doing it quickly and efficiently when we need to. But I was just going to suggest shooting an email to council to let us know, but I agree a consent calendar thing would be fine too.
So if I may, then what may make sense, because we also, a document that you have that goes on a shelf is out of sight, out of mind. Maybe what we do is we bring the boards and commissions item annually. So if there are any changes during the course of the year proposed, we proposed it with a red line once a year. Council can accept, not accept, or even if there's no changes, we just bring it back to you in the case you want to make a change, and we just leave it at that.
Council, I'd like to add that this concept is similar to, I don't know, I think you guys might remember, but when the last time the city clerks brought forth the records retention update, there was similar language that, requested that any future updates, minimal and administrative, be left up to the city clerk and or city manager to make unless they're substantive changes. So it would be similar to that.
I could go along with spot cleanup or minor tweaks, but I still would want to be notified. But I agree with an annual review of the overall book, because I understand there may be things mid-year that come up, or maybe a legislative change that might change something, especially with the requirements of training. That's my thought.
I think the example would be the planning commission's stipend, for example, that the council would have taken an action at a certain council meeting to make it $50, but the board handbook was not brought forward to reflect the change. What we would be saying here is, well, we'll make the change at the annual update of when we bring it forward, or we just designate the city clerk or the city manager to just make that technical change. I would, for consistency's sake, because we know, well, what's minor and what's a little larger than minor, I'd rather just say once a year, bring it forward, put it on the calendar. It comes January of every year. And if there's no changes, there's no changes. If there's changes proposed, just redline it, and then the council could pass by resolution that handbook, and away we go.
I'm comfortable with that. Anybody else?
I like it.
Okay. That was the last change. The council had approved 2 changes to the council operations and directed and put it in a handbook, which is a fantastic idea. However, 2 items will make for a very small handbook of the council. So what we would like to do is actually bring forward the other mandated stuff that you typically see in a handbook of the council. So when you'll first see the boards and commission document at the next meeting to approve. And then subsequent to that, we'll bring forward a handbook, albeit smaller, for the council for your review and consideration. But what will be in there that you didn't discuss would be compliance with the Brown Act, things that are already required by the council.
Well, if you take Jeff's law firm's book, which is a good starting point, or handbook, or whatever it is, and then incorporate, I think, the core materials there, I think those are good governing principles.
Okay.
And then maybe build upon with some of the other things.
Is that
Right.
acceptable to the council?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Perfect.
Chris, I have a couple of things. I don't know how much time we have. About an hour. Okay. There's 2 things. One, when do we expect? I thought through this process we were going to talk about things about how we propose a proclamation or a resolution. How and when does that, we're going to have these discussions about how we get to that versus, and which ones, what is going to be our process, and what is going to be our litmus test on what we're going to do.
So if I remember correctly in reading code, I think in code, it's explicit that the mayor can recommend a proclamation. And so the question would be, what kind of change do you want to make? And how do you want to define that is the question.
Okay. And the other thing is we might have covered it, and I'm sorry, I might have missed it. I hope I didn't, but subcommittees, the formation of subcommittees within our commissions, okay? I know that directors have a subcommission, had created a subcommission for the housing element, okay? But then I think during all the testimony and stuff about the Parks and Rec Commission, I heard that there was a subcommittee appointed, and I don't know how does that occur, and is that a part of the standard, having a subcommittee from even any commission?
That was another staff-created thing.
Okay.
And again, it didn't come, there were members from the Parks and Recreation Commission on it, and it dealt with the urban forest that Parks and Rec Commission was thinking about because staff had brought that information. But I'm trying to remember if staff actually said they were going to be doing that. All of a sudden, it just happened. and maybe they did, I can't remember exactly, but it was, again, a staff saying, oh, we want to talk about this, let's get some members of the public involved.
Okay, and so subcommittees don't necessarily have to be commissioners. The commission can or the staff member can reach out to the community and create this.
So let's make a distinction. In the board and commission handbook, there's already a subsection on subcommittees. So the commission can form a subcommittee, and that it should not last longer than 6 months. And I think we had that case in Parks and Rec, and it ended after the 6 months. A committee, a staff-driven entity that could advise the director or advise or get input is far more informal than a commission saying, we want to analyze a certain problem, let's form a subcommittee, and 2 of you on the commission sit on that subcommittee and tackle that problem. And so the question to you, Mr. Mayor, is, are we looking at, do we want staff-driven committees to then go under some kind of process? Do we want to restrict staff's ability to do that kind of input gaining through a subcommittee? I mean, I know the next example you're going to see, at least from what I'm going to recommend, is a quality of life task force. That's part of the administrative reorg, what we're trying to accomplish. That will be internal, external, but it's established by staff, not by council, by any formal action and whatnot. So it's not governed by a Brown Act. It's not governed by membership requirements. It's really, we want to get public and internal input on a wide-ranging topics so that we can formulate recommendations to the council. And so I'm trying to figure out what's the distinction. Are you looking at just the committees formed by the commission?
No, actually, I was trying to figure out, first off, planning has a subcommittee of 6 or 7 people, right? Okay, and I understand that's working pretty well. Okay, it did not come to the council, and nor do I believe it needed to come to the council. Okay, when we talk about subcommittees for the commissions, okay, are you talking about 2 people, or can the commission chair decide that I'm going to have a subcommittee on the commission, and they can reach out to the community and get 3 or 4 community members to participate in that? I believe participation is key and important. I just want to know what our procedure is.
So currently what's written is, yes, a commission can form a subcommittee, and they should be meeting for less than 6 months. The membership, although not specified, can't be a majority member of the commission, because then it would trigger the Brown Act requirements. So if you're a minority member, there's no restriction on including outsiders in that committee, but also there's no requirement that staff attend those ad hocs. The point of a subcommittee is, if we want to talk about the urban forest and really dig deep, do you want to take the time of the entire commission digging deep, or do you take a minority members and some outsiders and really start to flush out something to bring back to the commission? And it's at the commission level you have that engagement with staff.
I personally have no problem with that at all. I think that gives us an opportunity to reach out to people who really want to be involved, volunteering and stuff like that. So unless somebody else has.
Well, I think the one example I'm familiar with was public safety with CERT, that Mr. Patrick Jones, myself, and Mr. Josh Hibbert at that time formed the subcommittee. We hosted a couple of meetings at the ad hoc committee and filled up that community room at the sheriff's station just with people to talk about it, so that we could do the research to bring it back to the full commission. And then eventually we demobilized that subcommittee. So I think
that subcommittee, though, was 3 members of the Public Safety Commission.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So the members of the public, the three ad hoc subcommittee members were basically representatives of the commission doing what the commission agreed to, exploring the topic. They engaged the community and then brought the findings back to the commission for consideration.
Okay. Yeah, I remember all of that.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is that I don't think there's the participation of the public with the ad hoc committee doesn't require, in my mind, doesn't require an appointment, but
No.
it does allow for the engagement.
No, and I agree with you 100%. It gives the commission an opportunity to make their subcommittee and get as many, I would imagine they could get as many voices as they want.
Yeah, yeah.
So, does that sound okay? Any misunderstanding or?
No, it sounds like that was the intent of the language that's there to formulate it that way.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. All right, anything else? We have a regular council meeting in 9 minutes. So at this point in time, I'm going to adjourn this special meeting, and we'll come back in here at 7 o'clock.